One of Africa's longest-running conflicts has officially ended. On July 9, 2018, the East African nations of Ethiopia and Eritrea declared the end of their state of war and ushered in a new era of, quote, peace and friendship. It was a decades-long conflict that had a huge human cost, as it also exacerbated a famine in the 1980s that claimed the lives of over 1 million people. The declaration of peace wasn't just symbolic either. It had immediate real-life consequences for people on both sides of the border. Diplomatic relations were restored, flights between the countries resumed, and even phone lines opened up, allowing people in each country to call each other for the first time in 2 decades. I'm Judah, this is Now This World, and in this episode, we're going to explore the complicated history between these 2 countries and what led to the end of this conflict. First, let's take a look back in history. In 1890, Eritrea was colonized by the Italian Empire. Over the next few decades, fascist Italian forces used the territory as a launching point to attack the Ethiopian Empire. First in 1895 when they faced defeat, then again successfully in 1935. Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Italian Somaliland were combined and became Italian East Africa. But towards the end of World War II in 1941, Ethiopian and British forces ended the Italian occupation over the area. This move re-established the Ethiopian Empire, while Eritrea was colonized and controlled by the British. In the 1950s, the United Nations federated or combined the two, making Eritrea an autonomous region within Ethiopia. But Haile Selassie, Ethiopia's emperor, had different plans for the region. He ignored the UN and unilaterally annexed Eritrea in 1962. The move made Eritrea an official province within Ethiopia and made all Eritrean citizens Ethiopian citizens. The annexation sparked a decades-long fight between Ethiopian forces and Eritrean separatist groups. As Ethiopia became preoccupied with fighting off the rebellion in Eritrea, where thousands of people were forcibly displaced, it also faced a severe famine in the 1980s that would go on to claim the lives of an estimated 1 million people. The horrendous images from Ethiopia shocked the world, as it easily became one of the worst humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. A few years after this mass suffering, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or EPLF, led by Isaias Afwerki, went on to win the War of Independence from Ethiopia in 1991. And in 1993, Eritreans overwhelmingly passed a referendum for independence and shortly after joined the United Nations as a member state. After independence, tension between the 2 states eased for a short time. Things were so good that the Eritrean president even told an Ethiopian newspaper in 1996 that borders between the 2 nations were, quote, meaningless. But then things took a drastically different direction when tensions over a disputed area of land culminated in an outright military conflict. In May 1998, Eritrean troops entered the heavily contested town of Badme. Shortly after, the Ethiopian army launched an attack on the Eritrean forces. The fighting left an estimated 80,000 people dead over the course of 2 years. In June 2000, both countries signed the Algiers Accords, a peace agreement that ended active hostilities, but the 2 remained at odds over Badme. The agreement established a neutral boundary commission to determine borders between the 2 countries. But in April 2002, when the commission determined the town belonged to Eritrea, Ethiopia rejected the decision. This initiated a stalemate that lasted for nearly 2 decades. But then things very recently shifted in a major way. In April 2018, Abiy Ahmed came to power in Ethiopia. The 41-year-old is one of Africa's youngest leaders and has made a few reforms since gaining power. He pardoned political prisoners and rolled back censorship of over 200 websites, blogs, and television stations. But the most shocking of them all was Ahmed's announcement that he would fully accept and implement the 2000 peace treaty with Eritrea, officially ending a war that he had even fought in himself. And Eritrea was on board. On July 9, 2018, in Eritrea's capital Asmara, the 2 leaders released a joint statement saying they were, quote, determined to close this very costly chapter, which also had a detrimental role in the Horn of Africa, and to make up for the lost opportunities and create even bigger golden opportunities for their peoples. Some Ethiopians have even compared this opening of relations to the falling of the Berlin Wall. That's because since independence, Eritrea has become an increasingly isolated and totalitarian state under Afwerki's regime, which has been in place since 1993. His government's policies of indefinite military service, which some blame on the 20-year war with Ethiopia, the cracking down on any and all political opposition, and the widespread violation of human rights, had created a mass exodus of young Eritreans during the height of the European migration crisis. And Ethiopia has faced a number of human rights issues at home itself. According to Human Rights Watch, just since 2015, over 1,000 people were killed and tens of thousands more detained for protesting government policies. And there remains extensive restrictions on freedom of expression and press freedom in the country. But some human rights groups have expressed that they are hopeful that this new era of peace will lead to human rights reforms in both countries. So despite it taking quite some time to achieve, this latest diplomatic breakthrough is certainly something worth celebrating.